Welcome to the Piece by Piece Autism Podcast with your hosts, Angie and Christy. They've worked 25 years to help Alec get the most out of life. Let them tell you how they're doing it.
Hello, and welcome back to Piece by Piece Autism Podcast. We chat all things autism as it relates to Alec and his 28 years living now in a group home setting. We like to discuss all the things that we have learned, all of the lessons that we have been fortunate enough to learn alongside Alec as he is now living his best life. Today we're going to be talking all about sensory and stimulatory behaviors. This is a little bit tricky of a subject only because there is so much overlap between what a sensory behavior is and what a stimulatory behavior is. So we're going to kind of discuss them intertwined, and we just want to recognize up front the overlap of them and how a behavior can function both as sensory and stimulatory in different settings. So in a general sense, a sensory behavior is more driven by how an individual receives and processes sensory input, and stimulatory behavior is more how an individual seeks to regulate or express an eternal state. Today, though, we're going to talk about how we see and how we have addressed sensory challenges as roadblocks to learning for Alec. And we were kind of laughing. I know we are listeners, and many are listeners of the Mel Robbins podcast. And she's got her whole theory of the let them theory. And we were kind of joking that our theory on sensory behaviors and how these challenges act as roadblocks, we call it the don't let them theory. And we'll get into a little bit more of what that is, just because we've been able to help Alec overcome some of these sensory behaviors in a way that has allowed him to live a full and enriching life in some areas that could have been more of a block or a hindrance had we not addressed through behavior head on. So that kind of takes us into what and why are sensory issues a thing for individuals with autism, and which ones were Alec most bothered by?
One of the biggest issues that we've had with Alec is he cannot tolerate having a scab on his skin. And scabs on the skin are a necessary part of life, but he cannot stand them. So we've tried different medical approaches, meaning like we tried this one medication that is supposed to help with sensitivities towards things like scabs, and that did not work. It gave a lot of adverse effects, so we had to discontinue that. And then we try to put Band-Aids on him to kind of protect the scab while it's healing, and then go from there. And so he didn't like the feeling of the Band-Aid on his finger.
Yeah, of course.
So then we had to do the build-up tolerance to the Band-Aid. And the way that we did that is we would put the Band-Aid on, and we would have a timer set, and we would remove the Band-Aid before he could remove the Band-Aid. And then over time, that tolerance builds up, and he's able to tolerate the Band-Aid for longer. And we've tried all kinds of different Band-Aid types to see if some feel better than others, and trying to get him to the point where he could actually wear and tolerate a Band-Aid for a certain period of time.
Yeah.
And we have built up a pretty good tolerance. It is not perfect because it is a true challenge for him.
Yeah, that one's a tricky one. I do think he has definitely gotten better and is able to keep a Band-Aid on for, the day. He doesn't like when they get wet or, then it turns into a whole issue again. But that one is an ongoing struggle for him, most definitely.
Well, and the other issue is that he's a skin picker.
Yeah.
The skin picking creates the scab. And so trying to deal with that through his psychiatrist and trying to get him um, I mean, we've tried several different kinds of medication to deal
Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah.
it is an ongoing challenge, and we're always working on that. But like having the scabs, he'll sometimes have one right by his eye, or he'll wake up and his sheets will be kind of bloody, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like a real issue that we
Yeah.
have to stay on top of and continue to work on.
Yeah, another that we have addressed in a similar way is Alec keeping a wetsuit on. um, that tight pressure and the wet on his legs, especially, he did not love. So, like Christy was mentioning, the tolerance building of saying, "Hey, we're going to keep this on for however long, and I'll let you know when it's time to take it off," and then you get there, you address it, take it off before it becomes an issue or a frustration, and reward that. And he could build up tolerance in time, duration. Another that comes to mind quickly is gloves on his hand. He downhill skis in the winter, and keeping anything on his hands has proven to be difficult. His little fingers, when he was younger and would jump on the trampoline in the snow, it's like it didn't even seem to faze him to not have something on his hand, but then to have warm hands was more of a frustration for him. So,
Right, and living in Denmark and having him jump on the trampoline about
yeah,
an hour every day, literally.
yeah,
An hour every day, and he did not care if there was a foot of snow on the ground. Our little chihuahua would try to go out and jump towards the, and his legs would go all the way into the snow to the point that his body would be just
yeah,
stopped. And
yeah,
I would have to go grab that dog out of there. And then Alec is out on the trampoline jumping, and like trying to keep him bundled up was just such a challenge.
yeah. So now that he skis with a cool guy that he has mad respect for, it's like the peer
Yes.
pressure kind of does a little bit of that work for us. But historically, he has little to no grip strength, anyways, in his hands. So I'm sure having that bulk on top of, little grip strength and dexterity in his fingers makes it that much more challenging to kind of feel and be able to move. Same thing. We required, the gloves stay on for a certain amount of time. We'll take them off, make sure if he's holding on to his poles, he's got some protection there. But
Well, the other thing too is that, again, like the Band-Aids, we also tried various different styles of gloves. We've
yeah,
gone from sometimes using a mitten because he does not hold individual poles. He holds one pole when he's skiing across with his instructor at times when they're doing more difficult passages. But just trying different fabrics, different styles. I mean, there's a lot of different variations that you can go from, like a knitted glove inside of a mitten. I mean, there's all sorts of different things that
yeah.
you can try to make almost anything happen. So you got to keep that in mind and be flexible enough to look at all the possibilities.
Yeah, always a good idea to look into the various fabrics and styles. There's so many. Another one that Alec is very prone to is just the visual stimming. He loves pressure to his eyeball, and he'll sometimes poke the corner of his eyeball. We try to not let him do that too much. We don't want infections and other issues coming from that. But in addition to that, he likes to seek out lights and patterns. I love watching him outside. He'll watch the sun through the trees and the leaves and things. And I enjoy seeing the lights come through the trees as well. But I think he just has such more of a stimulatory input than I do. So I just sometimes wish I could kind of see through his lens. But he loves his light up toys. Oh my goodness, does he love his light up toys? And we give lots of opportunities for appropriate toy play and all of these visual inputs in, access so that we're not having to get it through squeezing our eyeballs or
Right.
Sometimes he likes to push his eyeball against the top of our heads and kind of squeezes his eyelids together on our heads. And we don't necessarily
We
love that.
we don't like
It feels weird.
that. Yeah, we don't like that. And
So,
he'll do it to people like that work with him.
mhm.
He doesn't walk up to a stranger and do it, but man, that is not a good feeling. But he's
No.
just seeking that pressure into his eyeball.
Yeah.
One of the ways that he seeks out intense sensory input as that and ways that we have been able to accommodate that desire for him is that he loves to be on an ATV, which we can buckle him into,
Hmm.
and he can go not super fast, but enough to get some wind through his hair. He really, really enjoys that, and it's a lot of good input for him. And he loves skiing fast. His ski instructor is very careful to take him down. What's it called? The path. Uh, runs.
Oh.
His ski instructor is very aware of what runs he can go down
Yeah.
safely. So whenever he's really craving the speed of going down a mountain, his instructor will accommodate him if he's warmed up, if he feels like he can handle it.
Hmm.
And to me, whenever I watch the video, I've said this before, it about gives me a heart attack to see him go down something so steep because I know how steep it is. But he loves that feeling of the speed of that. And so we can accommodate that as long as it's safe. And then like water splashing and slides, we do a lot to accommodate water play.
Hmm.
And we find that if we don't do the water play, we really suffer because he will
Find
act
naughty
up and
ways to, yeah.
he will find naughty ways to play with the with the water. And yeah, we don't like that. Like we don't like fingers in the toilet so much.
Yeah,
We're not big fans.
yeah, not a fan. He can
No,
be a
not a
fan
fan
if
at
he
all.
doesn't get if he doesn't get his water in the hot tub or his hand in the hot tub. His hand may be in the
Yeah.
toilet.
We don't like the hand in the toilet, so we try to avoid that. He's also got this the proprioceptive part of sensory, the body awareness. He has difficulty sometimes still sensing his body position.
Hmm.
And I mean, as much OT as we've done and stuff, he's still, I mean, it's improved since he was a little boy. When he was a little tyke, we would be in a room that had toys in it, and he would just walk over the toys as if he couldn't see them. And our consultant at the time explained to me that he does not have this body awareness
Right.
that other children do to be able to avoid the obstacles in the room.
Hmm.
He just steps over them. So we would call him Little Godzilla because he would just step right on top of a toy that was awkwardly positioned on the floor, and I'd be afraid he was going to fall.
Yeah.
But luckily close to the ground, so not super horrible. But we had a funny experience I was telling Angie about last night. We were leaving a restaurant and we went out onto the street, and Alec he was in between several people that were in our party. And so we all kind of felt like he was buffered, and we were kind of watching him go through a crowd. And he came up on this lady that was the tiniest person I've ever seen in person that close. She was probably 4'8", maybe. But he was covering her whole body from
Yeah.
my angle.
Yeah,
So
you
I
couldn't see her.
I didn't realize, but her family reached up and they all kind of made a noise like, "Oh," and he was just going to plow her over.
Oh.
He was listening to music, and he was just enjoying life and enjoying the fresh, crisp
Yeah.
air that Utah has to offer right now. And he was just unaware of this adorable little lady. And so I was able to grab him, and her family was able to grab her, and she didn't
Oh.
fall over. But I just saw her and I just said, "Oh my goodness, you're the most darling woman I've ever seen."
Oh.
And she was just smiling, and she said, "Oh, I'm okay. I'm okay." She was super sweet. I mean, just so understood that Alec might be a little bit special,
Yeah.
and she had no problem with it,
Oh.
but it scared me to death because I really thought he could have hurt her.
Oh,
So that was rough. That's a
yeah,
rough one.
that
The
is tricky.
proprioceptive stuff.
Yeah, it is
So
tricky. Um, I mean, these are just a few examples, and like I mentioned, so many of them overlap between sensory and stimulatory behaviors. So, how did we decide which sensory challenges to address and which ones to kind of just let slide or say, no, this is part of life for you. Just we're going to let this one go.
our criteria has just been what impacts him socially, what will he not be able to do?
Mm-hmm.
What will he be able to do? However you want to state it. We want him to be able to participate in as many things out in the community as he can and as many of his interests as he can. When he goes snow skiing, he has to have his gloves on. Now he goes out for almost the whole day. So to not have gloves on would be very detrimental to his health. So we have to have gloves. When he skis, he has to have a helmet. When he rides a horse, he has to have a helmet. When he works, he has to wear a hat. And because of the work that we've done with the helmet, we have been able to have him wear a hat. His hygiene items, like being able to tolerate a haircut, is made so much easier by the fact that we've addressed it head on and made sure that those haircuts can happen
Yeah.
as often as we want them to now.
Yeah.
So
I would say as a little guy, we definitely, his biggest hurdle, I mean, we've obviously listed several, but his biggest was probably all having to do with head sensitivities. He didn't like his head to be touched, his hair to be brushed. Although he did like pressure on his head, but that was different than a comb going through his hair. And we were able to kind of turn the pressure on his head into a reinforcement. Jill, Big Deal Jill, who was on our podcast a while back, talked about this nunga 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 nunga. And that's what she would do with him.
Yeah.
Is she would take both hands and squeeze his brains and nunga 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 nunga, and he loved that. But that was a very different sensory input for him and function than combing his hair, cutting his hair, having shears buzzing up against his head, or scissors, something sharp pointed at his head, or a helmet buckled under his chin. There's so much more that goes into these different items around his noggin. So
Yeah.
we worked long and hard, and one of the biggest tools that we used in addressing many of these targets was the use of counting and just saying, hey, we're going to comb through your hair, 10 combs here. So we would count and we would get to 10 with him staying calm. And then we'd, do it in the front and we'd work our way to the back. And there were different areas of his head that were even more sensitive than others. And it's sometimes funny to think back to what little tolerance he had, because now it just isn't an issue. So, like you said, wearing the helmet, wearing the hat, getting his hair combed or brushed, it's cut. It's not an issue in any of those scenarios. And so he can do all of those things. He can function, he can live his happy life, enjoying all of his extracurricular activities without that sensory problem being a hurdle any longer.
Well, and the other thing is it's another mark in the books for saying start your intervention young.
Right.
As young as you can start it, start working on these things.
Mm-hmm.
It made me really, whenever COVID came up and everywhere he would go, they would expect him to wear a mask. And I wanted to say, if y'all were going to do this, if we were going to have to do masks someday, I wish I'd known 9 months ago.
Mm-hmm. We could have been
or
working
6
on
months
this.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have been working on this. We could have been really good at this.
How come we didn't have the inside scoop?
I know. If we had known. But guess what? By the end of it, we have pictures of him tolerating it at a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we did, we would put it on and then we would say, we'll take it off in, 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And we would take it off, let him have a break. And our grocery store was so good to work with us. So, we kind of got the community helping us
Yeah.
to build up that tolerance because it was an important thing that he had to learn for our period of time that we were in at
Yeah.
that point. The other thing is that don't forget that a little education goes a long way. A lot of times, I look for the most difficult solution to a problem before I look at the simplest solution. And one of the simple solutions that I sometimes forgot about was just sitting down with Alec and having a calm conversation and educating him on, look, if you want to do X, we have to wear a helmet. If you want to do this, you've got to do that. And just give him, let's talk about horse riding. For riding, you wear special boots, you keep your toes safe, you put sunscreen on to prevent sunburn.
Mm-hmm.
You you have the rule in the barn that you have to have a helmet. That's all part of this. And put it into like social story form. Make it an education for him. I suggested this to my daughter too with her son, who he doesn't have, he doesn't eat fruits and vegetables, and just like sit him down and teach him about what does nutrition do for our body.
Right.
Because I have good nutrition, then I can do this that I want to do, and kind of give the education because sometimes we forget about the simplicity of that
Yeah.
because sometimes those things speak to Alec
For sure.
a
I mean,
lot,
he's so intelligent
you know.
and
Yeah.
practical in a lot of ways, but I think just the sensory overload can overrule the behavior sometimes. I mean, like the sunburn, I think when we go boating, we always have him in a long sleeve uh
Rash guard.
rash guard, thank you. And he tolerates wearing it. He doesn't mind it getting wet. That wasn't always the case, with wet items on his body, as we talked about the wetsuit. And so all of these things kind of build on from one to the other. But he has been sunburned, and I'm sure knowing what that feels like, he's going, okay, I guess this is better, So I do think
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
these individuals are intelligent and they have experienced life in some ways. And just like anybody, you live and learn. And they need some
Yeah.
more support and some more coaxing and, attention to situations and scenarios in which they're going to be addressing some of the sensory or stimulatory behaviors. But I think just finding a balance. We definitely let Alec have his beads. He loves his Mardi Gras beads. And he loves to break them into a long string, and he loves to tap them on a table, and all of that's a stimulatory behavior that we say, you got this one, bro. This is all you. And he can have them as long as behaviors are good, as long as it's not a distraction to those around him, but it's not hurting anybody. So we like to look for opportunities where he really can just be himself and still enjoy a bit of his stimulatory behaviors. But like Christy mentioned, I think our biggest deciding factor in knowing which ones do we really address head on and which ones do we let slide is, will this impact him socially? And does it allow him to function and live a happy life doing the things that he loves to do? So
This brought to mind for me the use of the Mardi Gras beads, like you said. Of course, we have rules about like when he sits at the table and he's doing table work, we absolutely don't allow them, and he knows that. He just
he'll put him
talked
down
about it
before before he comes to the table.
Yeah, we don't have to say that to him anymore. He just takes them, he sets them down beside him very neatly, and then once he's done, he picks them up and he goes about his day. But We had a consultant that really wanted him not to have them out in public, and his goal for him was to not have them as much as possible. But I found whenever I was traveling with him or having him at a restaurant or having him at many places out in public, that if I gave him the beads, he got more grace from people around him, the community. And I really liked that because if you see a guy spinning Mardi Gras beads, you know he's they're functioning in some
Yes.
way that's really important to him.
Yes.
And we honor that by saying, yeah, have your Mardi Gras beads as long as you're behaving. I mean, if he's acting up, it's a really good message to send to him to take them from him and say, okay, pull yourself together and you can have these back. And it's a nice little reminder to him. And it just rarely ever happens that's the case anymore. But I do like the way that it's kind of a message that it sends to the community.
Right.
That gives him a little bit more grace.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. We just, more than anything, like to prioritize Alec learning and growing and building pathways to independence. And ultimately, we want to have as little roadblocks as possible for him. And we have done the work. Alec has done the work at a young age. He's done it through OT, he's done it in PT, he's done it with ABA. And because of that foundation, he really is able to function and live his best life in a variety of ways, taking on these challenges that, like we've said, we're still addressing and dealing with the skin picking and the scabs and the band-aids. That's probably one of our biggest hurdles now that we're having to face. We prioritize the learning and growth and encourage you to really address some of these head on as you can younger, so that they just become a non-issue as these individuals get older and into hobbies and jobs and all of those things that require in some ways these roadblocks, potential roadblocks. So, well, thank you so much for joining us. That is a wrap for today's episode of Piece by Piece. We love that you are here and hope that you will help us spread the word and share the show. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Piece by Piece Autism Podcast. That's PIECE, Piece by Piece Autism Podcast. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.